Greetings, global gardeners. It's Monday, start of another great gardening week. And I've noticed in the comments already, a number of you are having cool and rainy conditions. Our rain may come this afternoon, but it's definitely been cool. It was much colder overnight here than it was forecast to be. The forecast was calling for about 38 degrees. That's about 3.5 Celsius. But when I woke up this morning, it was 34 degrees Fahrenheit, 1 degree Celsius. I was very concerned that the frost hit and it was spelling the end of my season. But I went out and checked, and the tomatoes and peppers seemed to be okay. So I think it was just a momentary drop, not enough to actually cause any serious damage. But the cold is definitely coming to my part of Colorado. And I think next Sunday may be the day that the frost is going to cause some serious damage. So we'll see. Keep your fingers crossed. I'm still harvesting tomatoes. I'm still harvesting peppers. I'm still harvesting strawberries. It's just such a great time of year for me because I don't normally get to harvest this late into October. So I'm enjoying every minute that I can. And that's one of those things I wanted to talk about today, the enjoyment of gardening. And you know me, I think that is a major factor when we talk about gardening, is the enjoyment aspect of it. But what happens when it's not as enjoyable? What happens when some of the stresses begin to affect your gardening? That's kind of what I want to talk about today. And I want to get your feedback as well. Let's try to make this as much a conversation as we can about the burnout. And it often happens at the end of the gardening season. You've been working hard all summer long into the fall. There's still work to be done, but you can't harvest anymore because the plants aren't producing. It's cold, it's rainy, it's just not ideal, but you got to get out, you got to get stuff done. And before you know it, you're feeling burned out. And that's normal, that's typical. All of us go through it at some point. Most of us go through it every single year. It's one of those things that I don't think is talked about often enough in the gardening world. We focus so much on the good stuff. There are so many studies out there now that talk about the benefits of gardening. You've got the physical benefits, you got the mental benefits, you've got the benefits to your diet. It's the benefits of the friendships that you create when you become a gardener. There's so many benefits to gardening that when we begin to not enjoy it as much, when we start feeling some of those stresses, sometimes we think we must be doing something wrong. It's supposed to be enjoyable. It's supposed to make us feel good. So what are we doing wrong when it doesn't feel good anymore? Well, you're not doing anything wrong. And that's why I wanted to raise this topic. And that's why I think it is something that we should talk about. It's okay to not enjoy gardening. There, I said it. It's okay to be stressed by gardening. That's the reality of it. It's how you confront it. It's what you do when you have those stressors, when you have those doubts that really make a difference. And so let's start off by trying to make an effort to define what the burnout really is. And so when we talk about burnout, often it's associated with a work environment. You're at work, you're just stressed all the time, and you're just burned out. Well, I'm carrying that same concept over into the garden. And so one of the signs is just a lack of energy. You just feel exhausted. You've just been working. You don't necessarily see the results of your labors. You get up and you just say, I got to get out. I got to weed. I got to fill that bed. I got to amend. I got to do whatever it is I got to do. And I'm just not in the mood. I just don't want to do it. And Believe me, I have many days like that. And that's why I want this to be a conversation. So I'm interested to see your thoughts on it as well. But, then if it takes it to the next step, we begin to border the idea of burnout because we all get tired. We all are like, I just need to take a day off from all the work I've been putting in the garden. But when negativism begins to enter the picture, when maybe you're looking at it and thinking, I'm just not doing good enough. I'm not keeping my plants alive. Everything seems to die. The tomatoes just aren't producing like they normally are. Now you're starting to get into that burnout phase where you're just like, is it even worth it anymore? And this third one is one that I begin to find myself managing on a fairly regular basis. And this is the thing that gets me to start thinking about, man, I'm feeling burned out. It's when you just don't do as good a job as you normally do. And for me, it's typically beginning with watering. I like to go out and water my plants and get up close to my plants and see what's happening in my garden. But then there are days where it's like, I'm just not in the mood to water today. So some of the plants need water. I'll go out, I'll water, and then I'll come back in the house. And when you reach that state where your performance begins to falter a little bit, in addition to some of the negative thoughts and some of the just non-desirous activities that you feel you have to do, that's when you can start thinking that, yeah, you're a victim of burnout. And it's okay. That's typical. I had a lot of burnout over the course of the summer. And one of the reasons I wanted to talk about this is because many of my YouTube gardener friends have been experiencing the burnout as well. It's it's the grind of making videos, it's the grind of working in the garden, it's just the grind that we've been doing this for years and years, and it's just not as much fun. Well, I'm here to say it still is fun. It still is fulfilling. You still get those benefits. You just need to maybe tweak the way you look at it a little bit. You need to modify your mindset, and that will help you get into this idea that burnout's okay. You're going to deal with it. You're going to move on, and it'll be one of those stories you tell about, oh, remember that year where I just didn't do anything? That's okay. For me, one of the biggest things, and this is often recommended when you have burnout, just walk away. Just take a break. If that means that you have to pull up some of your plants, if that means some of your plants die, that's okay. It's okay to just walk away from it. And you'll see, I saw Tony checking in from Simplified Gardening, and he and I have chatted a little bit about this. We're actually going to talk more later in the week, but we both kind of took the same approach when we hit that burnout phase. We stopped making videos. We just stepped back and started focusing on the other things that were important. Why we liked to garden, why we wanted to get out and wanted to do the activities that we got into gardening in the first place. Those kind of things will kind of recharge your mentality. They'll give you some of those benefits that you've been looking for. You just get back into it. Now, one of the ways that I do it is with my projects. So I'll highlight what Matt had to say. Matt had some overgrown arborvitae removed and picked up 256 square feet of sunny garden space, pretty much triple my current space. Have been digging in and amending beds to get ready for next year. Fantastic. And that is one of the approaches that I take. When I start feeling like the plants are just taking too much of my time, I just don't want to go out and deal with them anymore. I find a project like this, like the idea that and I know it kind of sounds crazy that I get tired of dealing with the plants. And so the solution is to make more beds and to grow more plants, but that works for me. that's one of those sparks like Matt. If I can clear out new space and add new beds, then that's awesome. That's great. I did that just this last week as I am starting to get that end of season burnout. I created a new bed area by my raspberries, and it's for blackberries. I'm going to be growing blackberries in this bed that I framed with cinder blocks. And I've already started amending the soil a little bit more than I normally would. And I'm already starting to look at varieties of blackberries that I'm going to grow next year. And just the idea that I'm expanding my garden and I'm doing something else is enough to kind of get me out of those doldrums, to kind of spark me back into enjoying gardening again. Because that's a part of gardening that I enjoy probably more than anything else. I love building my garden. I love planning what's going to go in all of the beds that I create and all the areas that I develop. I love that aspect of it. The plants that go in, of course, I love my plants. I spend time picking the plants. I take care of the plants, but the plants for me aren't as enjoyable as just the process of creating the overall garden space. So when I start getting that burnout, that's what I do. I add another bed. I add something new. That's why my garden just keeps growing and growing, because I love doing that. So maybe that might be something that helps you out. Share with me, if you would, those of you that have encountered or are encountering the burnout, some of the things that help you overcome it. And we'll be continuing with the conversation. I want to give a shout out and thank you to Catherine Lum. I appreciate that. Thank you for supporting the channel and for being here. That helps all of us. And it definitely makes my day when I see support like that. So thank you. Thank you so much for that. As we confront this, just be aware, and that's why I'm hoping I'll see some good comments. I'll start scrolling through here to see what you all have said. It's the awareness that we're not alone when we get into this burnout phase, that there are lots of other people that are thinking the same thing and having to deal with it as well. And so Floyd is saying, good morning. Good morning to you, Floyd. Lots of rain coming tonight. This weekend, my wife and I cleaned up one of our raised beds and put an in-ground worm compost bucket in the bed. New experiment for us. And that ties in exactly with the kind of things I'm talking about, the experimentation, the new things. And a worm bucket, it's a great way to experiment. I have, videos, and I've talked about vermicomposting, the worms that I keep in my basement. Trying new things like that is fun for me and for many others. And particularly when you put in an in-ground worm composting, and basically you take a bucket, you fill it with your kitchen scraps or whatever you've got, bury it into a raised bed, and you make compost in the bed using the worms, that whole vermicomposting system. So good on you. That's one of those things that you can definitely learn from. And I hope it does work out well for you, because the newness of gardening, I think, is what we lose when we start getting into the idea that we're burned out. We've just been doing the same things over and over again. Last year I did an all new garden. I was starting to get that burnout last year, even before last year started. It was basically the end of the year before. So at the end of 2023, I could feel the burnout coming. And I said, okay, so 2024, everything will be new. And some of you participated in that. When I put the call out, you tell me what I'm going to grow in the garden. And everything I did in the garden that year was new. All new varieties of the tomatoes, the peppers, the squashes, the melons, everything I grew. And I had a great year last year, confronting and dealing with and overcoming those feelings of burnout. This year, I reverted to doing some of the same old things all over again. And it's it's some of that, I think, that kind of added to the burnout mentality that I started getting. Was like, it's the same old thing. I need to do something new. I need to build a new bed. I need to try something new. And the video I did a couple months ago about the idea of lack of motivation within the garden. One of the things that I did, and I talked about this yesterday with Enoch in the live stream for the Urban Gardener Show. I built an area for my dogs. Too often when we get in our garden, it's just us in our garden. And that can add to the problem because you think, oh, I'm all by myself. I do all this growing, I do all the harvesting. My family enjoys it, but they never come out and help. It's just me, and I'm getting burned out. Well, my dogs are in the garden with me, and I like having my dogs in the garden with me. So I made a space for them, not for me, for them. I cleared out all the rocks. I amended the soil. I put in sod, and I made an area that they can lie down in the shade and just hang out with me when I'm outside. And they love it. If I'm working in the garden and I look around, it's like, where's Mala and Lika? All I have to do is look over by the shed, and they're lying down on their grass in the shade watching me work. And I love that. That's one of those little sparks that gives me that motivation to keep on going, because I know if I go in the house, they're not going to be as happy because they like being outside with me and I like being outside with them. So little projects like that can often pay huge dividends. I knew it was a good idea when I did it, but now months later, seeing how much a difference it's made with both me and the dogs, it was easily the top decision of the projects that I did this year. And it was so easy to do, but I had to act on it. And I was so glad I did. And I haven't stopped. There's lots of other projects, of course, that have been on the list of things that we're starting to do. And I've got more beds that are in my plans. I've got more plants that are in my plans. There's a lot of things I'm planning for next year. And I'm beginning the foundational stuff now so that I look forward to what's going to come next year. And that's a big aspect of confronting the burnout is trying to get enthusiastic again, even if it's something little. But what is it that makes you enthusiastic about gardening? And can you add that to your mix? Can you add that to your plan so that you don't get like all us old guys that have been doing it forever, that we just are done? No, I never want to be done with gardening. I always want to keep gardening and keep enjoying gardening, but it can be a challenge. Definitely can be a challenge. And there's Tony saying, yep, burnout been bad this year. And, Tony had made a comment in a live stream that we were on a little while ago. I haven't seen him check on yet, but Bowtie Life in the Garden had a live stream where he ate some super hot peppers. And I saw Tony's comment during that live stream. And that really got me thinking this week about Tony's comment having burnout and me having burnout and some of the others I've talked to that have been burned out. And it's like, if we're feeling it and we're getting lots of attention, we're getting lots of support from lots of people, if we're feeling the burnout, what is the average gardener feeling? And can we do something to help out? Lawrence says, my cure for burnout is in the early fall. I start planning on growing something new to give me a challenge. There you go. Exactly. Find that thing. And often it's that thing in the future. So thank you, Lawrence. I appreciate that. That is one of those things to start thinking about. And Sean said, my temperatures briefly dropped to 28 last night. I haven't checked to see the damage yet, but part of me is welcoming this first frost. And I'm glad you said that, Sean, because that's also part of the dealing with burnout. And I touched on it briefly at the beginning, is just accepting it. I'm kind of looking at it that way too. I'm loving the harvest of my tomatoes and my peppers. But here, since I'm expecting Sunday to really be the cold day, on Friday and Saturday, I'm just going to harvest everything. And then I'm looking forward to the frost. I'm looking forward to my tomatoes and my peppers dying. And I know that sounds terrible as a gardener, but I need an end to this season. I need that delineation so that I can start looking forward to next year, so I can start the planning for next year. And so sometimes it's just making a cut, the past and the future. We're done. The season is over. I did that with some of my beds earlier with uh, the plants I was growing, particularly the cucumbers that got hit by hail. It's like, okay, those beds are done. I'm not going to attempt to replant them. I'm not going to spend extra time trying to keep those plants alive. They're done. And now I'll focus on the things that are working well and that I enjoy doing. So it's the shift. And for some of us, we have those clearly defined time periods where it's this season, it's the next season, it's the season after that, and we're ready to move from one to the other. And so when good weather causes that delineation to kind of be fuzzy, that can kind of lead to some of that burnout as well. The gardening channel with hot potato says, my thoughts are farmers experience far more stress than backyard gardeners. Being a farmer is not for the faint at heart. Yeah, definitely. And farming is a tough business for a lot of people, particularly the smaller farmers. And that's one way to look at it. You may feel that it's hard keeping track of what you're doing in your garden, but there's always somebody that has it harder. It doesn't necessarily mean you need to relish that they're more stressed than you, but that might be one of your ways to deal with approaching burnout. Is it's really not that bad. It could be worse. And often when it's worse, then you have to deal with even worse repercussions and worse problems. So try not to reach that point. Our hen house is exactly right, saying sometimes all you need is a break, then you're refreshed. Everything has a season, including us. I completely agree. And so take a break. And for many of us, I think October is a good break month. The garlic being planted is about the only thing that needs to be done in our gardens for those of us that have winter coming and the fall is giving us these freezing and cooling conditions. So yeah, take a break. Just take days off. Just if you don't want to, don't go out to the garden. Find something else to do. Travel, go to dinner, go see a show, spend time with your family that doesn't involve the garden. Just take a break. When the time is right, plant your garlic and then take another break. Cleaning up your garden can wait. Pruning your plants, your trees can wait. There's a lot that we do in the fall, and I often recommend that you do them in the fall, like amending your soil. Well, it can wait. It doesn't have to happen today. Do it next week or do it the week later. Just take a break. So I completely agree with you that it is a good opportunity. And today's a holiday for many of us. It's Columbus Day in the US. Dwayne says it's Canada's Thanksgiving today. So this could be a great opportunity to just take a break from being out in the garden. However, you're spending the day, spend it with family, with friends. If you're at work, just recognize that today might be your day to take a break. And sometimes that can make a difference. Mobius says also the lessening of daylight in the northern climes can contribute. I have an excellent light therapy that I dragged out yesterday. That's a really good point. And of course, there's been studies that show that depression can increase because of the lack of sunlight. And that will tie into that burnout concept. One of the signs that you might be succumbing to burnout is some mild depression. You're not motivated anymore to do the things you want to do. You're exactly right. It could be that the days are just getting shorter, and we're all noticing it. It's dark in the morning, and it's darker at night earlier than you are used to. It's one of those things that it's like, yeah, fall has set in. But you know what I thought of yesterday? We're not that far away from December 21st. And really, just over 2 months away, but basically next week is 2 months from the shortest day of the year. And I look forward to December 21st because that's the point that the days start getting longer. And that always increases my motivation. That always increases my enthusiasm. So looking at it from wow, we're getting closer to the shortest days so that the days can start increasing, kind of shifting the way you look at it can make a difference. So I actually felt good yesterday recognizing how soon it's going to be little bit of light and a lot of darkness. And that's a good thing because it quickly reverses after that point. Tony says, Will, I've had burnout about 6 times over the years. Nothing this bad, though. So thank you for sharing that, Tony, because it just goes to show that even those of us that have been doing this for a long time and been gardening for decades, Tony goes back to when he was just a kid gardening with his grandfather, but we're still doing it. We're still doing it. It's just a recurring problem, as Tony points out. Kevin says, with all the prepping, planning, and research, all my peppers came down with bacterial leaf spot. Ugh, is right. I did get a decent harvest, but terminated them really early. So yeah, that's one of those things that can definitely get you down when something like a bacterial disease or fungal disease or the weather. For me, it was a hailstorm that I had last month that just devastated so many of my plants. So hope you're able to overcome that, Kevin, and take advantage. This is a good point. You talk about the prepping and the planning and the research. I hope some of that research is how you can deal with the problem going next year. Because Tony and I, a long time ago, actually did a video where we talked about rotating our crops, and neither of us rotate our crops because of the traditional decision that you have to rotate your crops. Well, you don't have to rotate your crops unless you have something like a bacterial disease that might infest your soil, and then you have to deal with it. So one of the easy methods when you have a bacterial disease is to avoid planting the plants that are susceptible to that disease in the same location again. You rotate your crops. And so you start growing your peppers in a different area, clean area. That's a huge reason. I talk about it in my book, why raised bed gardening is advantageous to most gardeners, in my opinion. It's because if a disease sets into your garden, it's usually one bed that has that disease, because the diseases tend to focus on individual plants or individual species within a plant family. And so if you've got one bed that's infected by a bacterial disease like leaf spot, then you can grow in another bed. And chances are that other bed hasn't been infected yet. So consider that and hopefully you've already come across that, Kevin, but that's one of those things that can make it a little bit different, or the outcome a little bit different and more successful, because you are keeping the disease from the plants that disease is going to affect. It's quarantining the plants within your garden in the individual beds. And it actually can be pretty effective. Susan says, good morning, and good morning to you. Work and travel has me away a few weeks. This causes more stress than burnout. Had to plant garlic early. Now hopeful we'll have some to harvest next June. So yeah, the stress. Hopefully the stress will be released. You'll be back home. You can enjoy your garden again. But that is a precursor for many of us to the burnout. So hopefully it doesn't hit you. Outlier Gardener says, I'm burned out from all the critter damage. They even got into my hardware cloth covered area. Oh no, sorry to hear that. My I had a new experience yesterday that kind of ties in with this. And my neighbors have chickens. And yesterday I noticed a chicken. Lika was kind enough to bring it to me. There was a dead chicken in my backyard. And I saw my neighbor and was talking to my neighbor, and something killed most of their chickens night before last. And it was one of those things like, what? What was the pest? What was it that killed the chickens? Because they had never had that problem before. And based on the evidence, I suggested that it might be raccoons, but it could be a fox. But I've never seen a fox in my neighborhood. Well, last night the dogs were just going nuts, barking at the window. I looked out the window and there was a fox in my front yard. I've never seen a fox before, but that was most likely the culprit to the dead chickens. So imagine, outlier gardener, my neighbor, yeah, you start getting damage from something that you don't have much control over. That can definitely start leading to the burnout. So hang in there and keep doing it. Ask my neighbor, are they going to get more chickens? And they're not planning it, but they'll probably get more chickens. And that's one of those things. It's like get back on the horse. Something hits and hurts, get back on that horse and do it again. And keep at it, because don't let them, the pests, the predators, get you down. You've got to fight back, basically, to keep it going, to keep the attitude as positive as you can. Dusty says, I was happy with the north garden that gets more attention because it ran on autopilot with few weeds. Good for you. Yeah, the idea, we were talking a little bit about lazy gardening yesterday with Enoch on that live stream. And I like that approach where you set up your gardens and they go on autopilot. That definitely helps when you start getting into the mode of I just don't want to go out and work in the garden. If you've got your garden set up where it essentially takes care of itself, that's a good approach. That can definitely help out. Gardening Channel Top Potato says, I've learned that when you're using your senses in the garden, you can be in the moment. I like that. And that moment allows you to forget all the stresses that you build up and you have created yourself. So well said. That's a good approach. And I like doing that as well. I had another good experience this week that kind of ties in with this. I've seen a butterfly for a few weeks now flitting around my garden. And I thought it was a monarch. I couldn't quite tell. There's a lot of butterflies that look like monarch butterflies. And so every time I saw it flitting, that was it. Nothing else was in the world. All of my attention was on that butterfly. And I'd take my phone out and I would follow it. And I was trying to take a photo so that I can confirm whether it's a monarch or not. And I've been doing this for a couple of weeks now. Finally, this week, I was able to capture it on some of my flowers. It's not a monarch, but just that idea of focusing on a single butterfly, all of the other stresses, all the other worries, all of the burnout was not even in my mind because I was in the moment. A butterfly in my garden made all the difference in the world. So thank you for suggesting that, because I completely agree. It's the little things that can often help us confront the big things. And those little things differ from person to person. Michelle says, it helps me by doing little jobs every day. Burnout happens when you garden and have to harvest and put up those veggies. And so, yeah, there's just so much to do, and that definitely leads to burnout. And so the little jobs, like the butterfly, like living in the moment, that can definitely make a difference when you're trying to figure out what to do. And Tony says sometimes you have to do something for yourself. Yeah, don't think in terms of all the big harvests and what you're going to be doing for everybody else. Do that one thing for yourself. Or my dogs, because they're basically, I keep my dogs happy myself. So when I say I made that grass area for my dogs, as I look at it, I really made it for myself because it really did make me feel good. It's doing those little things for yourself that really can make a difference as we start looking at some of these things that can make a difference. And bow tie life theory is good morning, delivering fence building supplies, but listening in. And so if you want to see David eat a super hot pepper and shake on video, go check out his live stream on the Bow Tie Life in the Garden channel. That was something that I'm not going to do. I've grown super hot peppers before, over 1 million Scoville units, and I've never eaten one plain. I usually mix them in with my jams and jellies. So I don't want to say you're crazy, David, but what you did was a bit crazy. Pop Cheese Corner says, growing something new to experiment helps me. And you know me, I'm always suggesting experimentation in the garden. So I'm glad to hear that, because yes, that is one of those things that even if you aren't doing it because you feel stressed or because you feel demotivated or you feel burned out, experimentation is often something that makes us feel good. It's new, it's exciting. We're living in the moment. We're trying to see what's going to happen. And even when it doesn't turn out, maybe you're hoping for one outcome, but a completely different outcome results. It's still okay. It's the experimentation. That's the fun part of it all. It's trying those new things. And I definitely like trying those new things. Al Pick is saying adding 2 more beds, a new raspberry patch next season. Good for you, raspberry patch. If you don't have a raspberry patch and you can grow raspberries, you should have a raspberry patch. So good for you for adding raspberries. I mentioned I've been harvesting strawberries. I haven't been harvesting raspberries. I've been eating raspberries every single day for a few weeks now. So I've got red raspberries and yellow raspberries. About a month ago, I dug up some of the yellow raspberries that were growing out of the area and transplanted them to kind of consolidate into a big patch. And they're just so delicious. That's one of those things when I'm feeling burned out, like these last couple of weeks, I just walk into my raspberry patch and I just start eating fresh raspberries. It's not a harvest. It's not to take indoors and make jam. It's not to do anything but just enjoy the moment of standing in the patch and eating that delicious fresh raspberry. That's one of those things. I've mentioned it before, of the things that really define a successful year for me. It's a tomato, a single tomato. That's all I need. If I can grow one tomato and eat it when it's fully ripe, I've had a successful year. Next on the list is raspberries. If I can just harvest a single raspberry for me to enjoy when I'm standing in my raspberry patch, that's it. It's simple. It's the simple little things that can make the difference. And so this has been a successful year for me. Even though I didn't get all the cucumbers I was hoping, I didn't get all the okra I was hoping, I didn't get a lot of what I was hoping. I harvested my melons early because of the hail. They weren't sweet, but I harvested the melons and I ate some melon. So that was good, but it was successful for me this year because I had that tomato and I had that raspberry. It's the little things. As big as my garden is, I don't need a big harvest for me to feel good. I just need those little things, the things that for me are the reason that I garden. And if you can define that for yourself, that can help you when you start feeling a little depressed, a little down, a little burned out, wondering if you're going to do it again. Well, what is it that you enjoy most about gardening? And maybe that's all you need to do. You don't have to have the big garden. You don't have to do all of those things that you normally do. I've done hundreds of jars of jams and jellies yearly for many years, but I don't do that anymore. I just do a few because I like making jam and jelly. I did the video recently about the prickly pear jelly. I like doing that, but I don't need to do the big production like I used to. Just a little bit is enough to kind of scratch that itch and to, at least for me, make me feel good about the things that I'm doing in the garden. Llama Llama says, I've got the opposite of burnout this year. Good. We've had to do a lot of house repairs this season, so I've been lucky to get out in the garden long enough to water. I'm longing for the garden next year. Good for you. Yeah. And exactly. Tony said it's happened to him 6 times and he's been gardening for 40 years. It doesn't happen every year, and it doesn't happen to all of us on a regular basis. It's occasional. So take advantage of the benefits. Take advantage of the idea that, yeah, I've been dealing with the house repairs. We did a complete housing renovation about 10 years ago now, I guess, a little more than that. And we had moved into a new house, complete remodel, like tear down to the studs kind of remodel. And I wasn't able to have the big garden that year. I had a couple tomato plants. I was able to get my tomatoes, and I planted my raspberries that year. So that little bit that I was able to do that first year we moved into that house was great. That was wonderful because so much of the time was spent on the building and the renovation. So I feel your pain, but get out and water and just soak in all that wonderful garden energy. Naturalist Gardener says, I don't get to do a lot of gardening during the week because of work, watering and a little harvesting before I leave. But yesterday I did lots of trimming, fencing, etc., and have felt good. Good for you. Yeah. Guess, that's why I'd say it's proven. Research shows that just being out in the garden and doing some of those things you love makes all the difference in the world. And that's what I'm encouraging that you all get out and do. Dale saying, I recently purchased a 6x3 by 1 foot metal raised bed. I'm going to use it to feed kitchen scraps to the chickens, add leaves and weeds, new compost experiment, this week's project. So good for you. I like that idea. And I hope you're taking notes because there's a lot of these good suggestions that are coming in now to help out what other people are doing, some of the experimentation ideas, some of the things they're trying. So good for you. Yeah, the metal raised beds give you lots of options, and especially if you've got chickens and you'd like to make your own compost, lots of good opportunities there. Big Will Dog says, the main companions I typically have with me are my dogs. Even my own hole digging husky makes me feel complete. Very few humans allowed in my garden. There you go. Yeah, the dogs are just so special. And you've got your digging husky, and I've got my digging dogs as well. And I love having them in the garden. A few holes here and there, it's not that bad. Michelle says, I dig my compost into my raised beds while the ground is not frozen. We'll do this until I can't. So far, it's working great. Also, I cover the ground with deer fencing, so no critters. Those are good things, good ideas of things to do in the fall. And so I've got a lot of beds that I'm planning on amending, and you don't have to do them all at once. Just a few here, a few there. And so, yeah, dig compost into a bed today. And then a couple of days from now, do another bed. And then a couple of days later, do another bed. And if you do that until it gets to the point that the ground is frozen, even for those of us that live in areas with frozen ground, we can still get out and work when it's cold and just take a little bit at a time. And I like the idea of covering the ground with fencing. I've got all my trees and bushes fenced because of the deer. And of course, there's wire underneath all of my raised beds. Those are activities that can keep you busy and keep you active in the garden, even when it's cold outside. And Betty's exactly right. It's easy to get burned out when the weather won't cooperate. And that's one of the biggest factors, especially for me, is the weather. And it, if you get used to it, then you can actually use it to your benefit. And so that's why this year, because my first freeze is so late, I'm taking advantage of it with the harvest and continuing to grow. I'm normally expecting my season to be over the first week of October because that's what almost always happens. And it's because the weather ends my season when we get the freezes. And I'm expecting it. I'm used to it. And it it doesn't necessarily lead to burnout because I've gotten used to it. And it is a normal part of my planning. It's when the weather doesn't cooperate, when it's unexpected and something just doesn't go the way you wanted it to go. That's when some of that burnout and the depression can set in. Dusty says, I think of food security when gardening. There you go. Growing your own food can definitely make you happy. Matt is asking me and Tony, you and many others have very large gardens. Do you sometimes feel that you have too much garden? Yeah, exactly. That's why I say sometimes it is a good idea just to walk away. And Tony has a huge, well, multiple plots on his allotment. And we've talked about this as well. Having too big a garden creates problems. And you have to realize that that is one of those things that you might have to confront. I like building the new beds. I like expanding my garden. But I've got four beds that I have built over the course of the last 2 years that I haven't filled yet. I've just enjoyed building the beds and putting them in place and thinking about what I'm going to grow. And I still haven't filled the beds with soil to even begin growing in them because the garden has just got too big for me to do everything. And so until I figure out just exactly how I'm going to manage my big garden space, I continue to expand because I just love doing that. But I'm not growing in the entire garden. I'm still keeping some of those beds empty. And I think, and I kind of did a little bit of it this year. I will rotate my time. So I'll grow in some beds one year and other beds I won't even plant. And I did that in some of my vegetable beds this year. I didn't even plant a couple of my vegetable beds. And I've always planted in those beds, but I didn't this year. I focused on some of the other areas instead. So that's kind of how I approach it because there's just too much to manage. And partly because of the burnout. If I wanted to spend 4 hours a day, every single day, I could do everything in my garden, but I just didn't want to spend that much time. So I cut back and I walked away from some of those beds because it was just too much to garden. If you are in that mode where you just love spending all of that time in the garden, then absolutely go for it. Do the big projects and stay busy in the garden if you got the time. Nothing wrong with that at all. I encourage it. But if you get to that point where you're thinking it's too much, then it's probably too much. And so back off, even if just for a few months, maybe for a year, maybe more, whatever it takes. But it's okay to back off a little bit. Naturalist Gardener says, I grew radishes for the first time and they turn around so fast. I'm on my fifth planting. Very satisfying. Very good. Yeah, radishes are a great crop for the quick turnaround. And I don't know if you did it, but particularly when you grow different types of radishes, that can be a lot of fun too, because you see them grow so quickly and you can harvest them. And a month and a half later, you've got a whole new different crop within the same bed. So that's good for you. Jeanette says, my out of control garden contributed to my burnout. Hard to get to produce, over ripened fruit. Next year will be different. Exactly. There's always next year. And that's one of the things, that's what makes gardeners so resilient. There's always next year. Didn't turn out this year. I got burned out this year. I wasn't happy this year. The weather was terrible this year, but there's always next year. And next year is always better before you put another seed in the ground, next year is going to be better. And it's that enthusiasm, it's that positive outlook that I use to put that first seed in the ground next year, because we know it's going to be better next year. I had my granddaughters plant my vegetable garden this year. They sowed all of the seeds. They chose what was going to go in the ground. And my young granddaughter likes okra, pickled okra. She wanted me to grow okra. You've probably heard me say that okra is my nemesis. I have a hard time with okra, but I grew okra for her this year and it did great until the hail came and just destroyed all the leaves on the plant. But for that brief period where the okra was producing and just looking beautiful, oh, it was so satisfying, so satisfying. And so that's another thing to add to the list. I had a good year this year because I grew okra. Even though I didn't grow a lot of okra and it didn't grow as long as I would have liked to have grown it, it was a good year for okra in my garden. So I really, really like the idea of next year, because I've never gone into a season thinking I'm going to grow okra and I'm excited about it. I've always gone into the season thinking, well, I guess I'll try okra again. And I'm expecting that it's not going to grow very well again. But now I've seen that it can do well. And I'm looking forward to growing okra next year. Complete turnaround. But that's how our brains work. And that's how next year can give us that motivation to overcome some of the negativism that we encounter within the garden. Texas Organic TV says, I'm burned out on life stuff and health struggles. My little garden helps me. For my birthday next month, I'm getting a rabbit. Oh, cool. And yeah, that definitely ties in. If your life, if your health, if your work, all those things that lead to burnout respectively, it's easy to carry that into the garden. And so looking at the garden as the curative space, as that thing that helps you, absolutely use it to deal with burnout. I'm talking primarily about getting burned out with your gardening, but yeah, you can think about it from the other perspective as well. Use gardening to deal with the other burnouts that you have in your life, because I think gardening is just that important with the things that we want to do. Gina's saying, my garden is small enough that the work level is manageable, but the downside is I can't expand to try new things. Have to learn how to innovate, or tear out to innovate, I guess is what you meant to say. So try containers, try some indoor gardening, try hydroponics. There's things we can do in the house that can also scratch our gardening itch if you've got a small space outside that you're not able to grow in. So maybe experiment with some other things that you haven't thought about, and see if that gives you that opportunity to do more growing. Nancy says, I made a large batch of roasted pasta sauce with the last of my tomatoes yesterday. Ooh, I like that idea. I still have some tomatoes in my freezer to make sauce, so I like that idea. So using the last of the tomatoes often is a defining moment in your garden year. Bowtie Life says, the thing that motivates me most is getting to share my garden with others. Good attitude. My garden tours in the comments on those videos are the most exciting thing for me. And I talk about this every week, just how I love you all and I enjoy this time on Mondays. And that really does help a lot. So like when Dave makes a video and gets the comments on those videos, those are exciting. It's the same for me too. The comments I get, the comments that we have back and forth on these Mondays, it makes a difference. For those of us that do this kind of thing, we appreciate the positive comments, and it really does make a difference. Often it's what keeps us going. When I was having the video burnout this year, and was going 6 weeks between videos. Some of you may have noticed that. What got me back into making videos, I made a video last week and the week before and the week before. So now I'm kind of back on my regular schedule. It's the interface, it's the comments, it's making the video. And even though I make a video and I know it's not going to become viral and I know it's not going to get a lot of views, all it takes is 1 or 2 positive comments and it's all worth it. So we do appreciate all of those kind of comments that happen when we're making videos, and within the garden as well. I love it when someone visits my garden and says a nice thing. And that's why when I go to someone's garden, I always try to say a nice thing, because we do appreciate that. Liar Gardener says, I'm so burned out from dealing with all of the critter damage that I took a couple of days off from the garden to recharge. Good. I think I have the mental energy to refortifying the garden for next season. Good for you. Yes, walking away, taking time off, recharging, and then figuring out what you're going to do for next time definitely makes a difference. Pat says, Gardener Scott 2 years ago took an entire season off and went to gardening school because armchair gardener reading books, taking virtual garden tours revitalized my spirit. Now, good for you, Pat. Yeah, I think that's a great idea. You can be a gardener without growing a plant. I've said this many times. Being a gardener is a state of mind. It's how we treat each other. It's how we approach our lives. And you don't have to have a big garden. You don't even have to have a single bed that you're growing in. If you've got that mindset that you want to learn, that you want to do some of the research, that you are a gardener at heart, then sitting in your chair and reading some books or watching some videos, yeah, I think that's a great way to approach gardening, especially when you want to become a better gardener so that the next season is going to be more successful. So good for you. I actually think that's a nice way to approach things. Tammy says, I think my burnout has more to do with work. I'm currently to the point in the year where I'm working overtime, many weekends. I feel like I have no headspace for anything else. And this is one of those where it sounds like the cure might be going into the garden and just standing in the garden and revitalizing, because the burnout is real and we all have it in different ways at different times. So I'm sorry to hear that work is causing that burnout. Hopefully the garden will give you some of that positive energy that you need, Tammy. And I know it does for very many of us. Eddie says, talk about burnout. As soon as we get some rain, I got to get our local fire department help burn my property off just so I can access the garden. It's a mess. Yeah, that's an interesting approach to burnout. Be careful about what you do. Definitely don't do it yourself. Get the help of the local fire department. I know Tony will appreciate that. The idea, we've got people in the state of Colorado that want to do some little burning that they don't think is a big deal. And before you know it, we've got wildfires all over the state. So I'm glad you're looking at getting the local fire department help. That's a good approach to it, definitely. Marlene says, we had our first frost last week and everything except for the potatoes are out of the garden. I look forward to starting my indoor salad vegetables under lights. Awesome. That's, and that's one of those things. That's why I say the idea of moving inside to do some of your gardening really can make a difference and really can get you still gardening. It doesn't have to be outside. So I like the idea of an indoor salad garden to be able to keep everything happening within your mind as far as the positive aspects of the gardening and keeping it positive. So there's Jay. I know I'm a little bit behind on the comments, but there's that link to that video. It talks about the crop rotation and why you don't do the crop rotation. So I'm going to fast forward and try to catch up a little bit and see that I'm not too far behind. Samantha says, thank you for all your videos. My daughter bought a home and I've been sending her your videos to help her get ready to build a garden that eventually will rival mine. Well, thank you for that, Samantha. I do appreciate it. Like I just said, it's these things that really motivate me and keep me going. So thank you so much for saying that. I do sincerely appreciate that. And I hope she does have a fantastic garden. You'll have to remind us as that develops how it's going. So you can say, remember a year ago or 2 years ago, I said my daughter was building this new garden. Well, here it is. So, yeah, be sure and keep us up on that, because I like hearing that kind of thing. And it's the the sharing of gardening that we gardeners do that I think also makes us special. Like we already talked about, David said he likes to share his garden, and I think that's a big deal. I love going to other people's gardens and sharing ideas. I love people coming to my garden and sharing ideas, and I love it when I hear someone say, remember that thing we were talking about? Well, I was talking to my neighbor, or I was talking to my daughter, and now they're going to do that. Oh, it's just the gift that keeps on digging. So keep doing that. Big Will Dog says, is it just me, or even when things go right, you always find more things on the to-do list than in the done category? I need to learn that good enough is good enough. Yes, good enough is good enough. And no, it's not just you. I've got so many things on the to-do list that it's a reason to keep me going, because I got to get those things done. That's just the way I'm. If it's on my to-do list, I've got to get it done. I might not get it done this week or this month or this year, but I've got to get it done. So there's always more on the to-do list. Absolutely. That's just the way most of us are, because like I said at the beginning, I like doing things in the garden. I like adding things in the garden, and the list keeps growing because there's a lot more to do. I did the video a few months ago about the pathways and the borders. Well, just that one area that I added a border to, now I'm completely rethinking that space. I wasn't going to put beds on the other side of that space until I put the border in. And all of a sudden I realized, oh, I need plants there. So some of these projects just lead to more projects, and I'm okay with that. I love the new projects, but it also means that fewer are getting done because more are getting scheduled. So just be aware of that. If you're a builder and a planner like me, you're never going to be done. And that's part of the enjoyment. Texas Organic TV says, we're talking about burnout and I'm feeling better and better. Well, good. I'm glad. That was one of the reasons I wanted to talk about this today, because that's one of the things that we can do to confront it, is to admit it. Admit that you've been burned out. Admit that you're feeling a little depressed, a little sad, a little stressed, whatever the symptoms might be. Admit it, and then talk about it. And you'll realize that there's a lot of us that are thinking and feeling the same way, but we're just not expressing it. Nobody wants to talk about how bad they feel or how terrible their lives are. They think nobody cares, but we do. That we're gardeners, we care. That's why we need to be talking about it. Serena says, a gardener's work is never done, even as the growing season ends. Chop and drop, compost making projects, seed saving, testing, soil testing, reading, watching YouTube, etc. I completely agree. Absolutely agree. And that's one of the fun things about being a gardener, is making that list of all those things that need to be done and not getting too sad or too upset when it doesn't happen the way we want it to. Sandy says, when I don't feel like working on the garden, I remember to thank God for the opportunity to grow food. There you go. Yeah, looking at what you have and taking satisfaction in that. Gina says, my entire garlic crop failed last year from rust and raccoons. Looking forward to fighting that next year. There you go. Looking forward, getting that positive mentality as we move forward, so that we have something to to work toward. There's Deborah. That's called something to look forward to. Always a good thing. Good, good. I I I like that idea that it's looking forward to things. And Texas Organic says, "LOL, I've had disastrous growing years." But that's what keeps us going. Every now and then I'll mention the year I had almost 20 years ago, probably about 16 years ago, I guess it's been. And I had 3 gardens that year. The first garden was planted, and between insects and deer and hail, everything was devastated a couple weeks after I had planted. I planted again. A couple weeks later, same thing happened. The weather in particular destroyed everything. I planted a third time, and luckily that third garden did pretty well, but it was later than normal. I didn't have as much growing because I'd already destroyed all the plants that I had started indoors. But it was a successful year because I was able to harvest a tomato by the end of the gardening season. And took me 3 times to do it, and that tomato plant was one I had to buy at the store to put in the ground, but I was still able to do it. So disastrous growing years, it's all relative. How do you define a successful year? And that's why I keep it simple. A single tomato. And that I kind of learned that lesson all those years ago when everything failed over and over again. And when I had that single tomato, it's like, it was worth it. And ever since then, that's my definition of a successful year is everything can fall apart. But that single success means it wasn't a complete disaster. It was disastrous, but it wasn't a complete disaster. And I think that differentiation can sometimes make a big difference when you are able to recognize the little things as opposed to the things that are staring you in the face that went wrong. Yeah, avoid those. Look at the little successes, and that is what it's all about. Nikki's asking a question. Does garlic planted in a container need to be watered during the winter, especially if there's a dry spell or if it's unseasonably warm? Yes. Generally, the guidance is during the winter, if the weather warms above 40 degrees Fahrenheit, that's 4.5 Celsius, then you should consider watering. Because when the weather gets that warm, the soil begins to thaw, and you can water, and the water will actually be absorbed by the soil. If you don't water, and that's a big mistake a lot of gardeners make that are growing in containers, is they don't water at all. You run the risk of the plants dying. The roots will be desiccated. If there's bulbs or corms or garlic that are growing in a container and they dry out completely, that's enough to kill them. And a simple watering during a dry spell, or if it warms up again, can make a difference. It may not be warm enough for the plants to grow, but it's warm enough for the roots to absorb moisture. It's warm enough for the roots to even grow. And that's what you really are focusing on when you're doing container gardening in winter, is keeping those roots alive so that the plant will sprout back up again in the spring. So be careful that you don't oversaturate. You don't want to, especially when it's warm for a period of time, you don't want too much water that's going to rot the plant, the roots, the bulbs, whatever it is that's in that container. But winter gardening can make a difference. Here in Colorado, we have a big problem with that. And it's actually called winter kill. It often happens in our lawns, but it can carry over into our gardens and into our container growing. And it's exactly that. You might think of Colorado as being snowy and cold all winter long, but that's not the case. We have mostly dry months. January and December are among our driest months. And even though it might snow, there's not a lot of moisture in that snow. And so if we don't do supplemental watering when it warms up, because in December, it can easily warm up into the 60s and 70s. 24 degrees Celsius in December is not unheard of. Well, you have to water. Even though you've already put the hoses away, you've blown out your sprinkler system. If you don't water, you're going to kill your plants. And so what inevitably happens in many areas where I live in spring, when rain comes, when you turn your sprinklers on, when things start growing again, you've got big areas that are dead. The winter kill set in, and that's because they didn't get the water during that critical time in winter when it was dry and it was warm and the plants were awake and the soil just dried out too much. So winter watering can be very important if you live in a region like that where you have cold and hot and need to try to keep your plants alive. So be aware of that. So it can be a little bit easier in the garden. A lot of people with lawns rely on their sprinkler systems. And then when they spray out or blow out the sprinkler systems when the freezing temperatures come, they've got no way to water the lawn. A sprinkler and a hose is good enough in the garden, on your lawn, wherever it is, to make sure that you avoid those kind of issues. SJK is asking, what's the proper way to put an asparagus patch to sleep for the winter? So the asparagus spears will grow, the fronds will develop, you leave those in place, and then when it gets cold, they turn brown. Cut them off. Just cut them down to the ground. They're not needed anymore. So that's the first step in preparing your asparagus beds for winter, is just cutting those brown dead fronds all the way down to the ground. And then what I do is I add some compost, I add some mulch, and that's it. The asparagus roots are usually pretty deep. And I've got my video on how I planted asparagus. And we're talking deeper than most of the other plants we're growing in the garden. So they're in a fairly stable temperature range. And even when the soil freezes, asparagus can handle that. So you don't really need to do any covering. It's not the plant that is surviving through the winter. It's the roots that are surviving through the winter. And so while you might need to cover the crowns of some of your perennial plants, or you might need to put extra protection around some bushes or some trees, you don't really need to worry about that with asparagus because it's all happening underground. And so if you cut off the fronds, then you're kind of sealing up that root environment. I did kind of a quasi experiment over the years periodically where I'll leave those fronds up. And what happens, particularly in my windy area, you got this big stalk of dead asparagus that's blowing in the wind. Well, it's opening up the soil as it blows back and forth, and that lets cold into where the roots are, and that lets the snow in, and I think it kind of accelerates the freezing. And what I noticed is when I left the fronds up like that, the next year, that section of asparagus just didn't grow as well. There weren't as many spears. And so cut it all down to the ground, mulch it, and don't worry about it. It's as simple as that, because the asparagus will survive through the winter. It's used to the cold. And do consider winter watering. If, like me, you have those dry spells that could last a couple months, and then it begins to warm up, I'll take my watering can out and I'll just water my asparagus beds. I do that with my strawberry beds, all of those kind of plants that are susceptible to winter kill. If they don't have a little bit of water, I'll do a little bit of winter watering on some of those beds with my watering can. It's a lot of work, but it does make a difference, I think, in the great scheme of things, and how much effort you want to do, and it gets you back out in the garden. I've made videos in the garden where it's well below freezing, just because I can get out in the garden. The day is nice enough that I don't have to be cooped up indoors. So I don't mind taking the watering can out to the garden in the middle of winter, because it gets me out in the garden. It's just one of those kind of things that, for me, that makes a big difference. Yeah, and there's that video. Thank you, Jay. Jay is just so incredible. Jay is like the busiest working woman on YouTube and doesn't get enough credit. So thank you, Jay. There's the link to that video about my asparagus beds and showing how deep they are planted. I actually am transplanting. I've been meaning to do it for a couple of weeks, but it's on my list of things to do this week. So I have some of my asparagus are female plants and they seed, and I've got asparagus popping up all around my garden, just little volunteers. Well, I've been moving those volunteers to a patch over by my fruit trees. And so before the winter sets in, I need to dig up those little asparagus plants and move them to the new area. With new plants like that, particularly since they sprouted from seed and the roots are close to the surface, I do add extra mulch. I do put a little bit extra mulch on that new area with those plants that are not buried as deeply. But if you do like I did, where you're doing the bare roots of 2 or 3 year old asparagus, those are the ones that go much deeper. But the shallow plants, a little bit extra mulch can make a difference going into the winter, depending on how harsh your winters happen to be. And yeah, you don't need to blush, Jay. You are an incredible facilitator. You know, Tony, Enoch, David, there are just so many of us. I know there are others as well that you have helped out, and you're always there, always at the forefront. So it's greatly appreciated that you are doing it. And I agree. Llama Llama says you need a special mod play button, best mod on YouTube hashtag. That's a good hashtag. I appreciate that on Jay's behalf. So thank you. It's good to have that that assistance that we can give each other in this crazy YouTube world. Texas Organic TV says another feral cat tip: barbecue wooden skewers, pointy side up, or even toothpicks. Yeah, I've seen the toothpicks. I tried the toothpicks a while back, and the cat just knocked over the toothpicks as it walked through the garden at night. But the wooden skewers are a little sturdy. I haven't tried the wooden skewers. I've done chicken wire, just lay bare chicken wire on the surface of the soil. And at least for me, with the cat issues I've had in the past, that seemed to do a pretty good job. So not sure who was talking about feral cats, but there's a couple ideas to deal with cats that are digging. And that is, those of you that have had it happen know what I'm talking about, where you aren't wearing gloves, you got your bare hands, you're scooping your soil, and that's how you discover that there's been a cat in that bed. That is not a pleasing experience to have. So you got to get rid of your cats when you discover something like that in your garden. That's all I'm going to say about that. And Carla says chicken wire works well with cats. They can't dig it and move along. And also, I think the roughness of it, they don't like the feel on their paws. But yeah, definitely they can't dig and they move on. So I only use the chicken wire in my vegetable beds after having discovered that there were cats in those beds. But if you've got the cats, something like a pokey stick, a chicken wire, anything to deter them and move them to some other place definitely makes a difference. And it works with squirrels too. Pop Cheese Corner says the squirrels drive me crazy. And the chicken wire can make a difference with the squirrels as well, because they have that same issue. They're not able to dig into it. They might be a little more inquisitive and find the edges and try to dig around the edges. But that is an option to try to keep them away. Tammy says a feral cat tip is to plant catnip or cat mint somewhere away from your garden, either in your yard or if there's a nearby weedy area, they'll get distracted. They also aren't a fan of straw. Yeah, I use straw as a primary mulch. But you're right, and I often talk about this. Send them someplace else. I'll do that with with deer, with insect pests. Yeah, give them something to eat someplace else. And that's where they'll go, and with squirrels, you've heard me say this before too, put up a squirrel feeder, feed the squirrels away from your garden and they'll never come into your garden. So I know it's counterproductive to feed a pest, but if it saves the rest of your garden and it's not that much effort, sure, go for it. And it's easy to grow catmint. It's real easy to do that. It can spread a little bit depending on what variety you get, but that will attract them for sure. Absolutely. John C. says rose prunings work well for cats, but occasionally spear the gardener. When I pruned my roses this year, I had that thought. And it's like, I haven't seen any animal pests in these rose bush beds, but I'm going to lay down these thorny cuttings so that I don't have an animal problem. And yeah, it was me that got pricked by the thorns that I had laid on the soil surface as I was putting other plants into those beds. So the rose prunings do work well for cats, but you do need to be aware as the gardener who put them into place. Don't forget it. You're gonna prick yourself if you're not wearing gloves. I mean, if you are wearing gloves sometimes. So I have learned that the hard way this year because my rose bushes are doing so great, and I've been tending to them and working in those beds and sticking myself quite a bit on those dried prunings that I'd forgotten were put there. So try to remember those kind of things. Nancy says birds will eat greens if they don't have a water supply. Yeah, I'm a huge advocate of water for the animals that are coming to your garden. And so having a water source for insects, the pollinators, the birds, my dogs will drink from the water I have set out there. Definitely makes a difference. And you're right, the birds need that moisture in their diet, and they'll get it from plants if they can't get it from a bird bath or fountain or whatever water source you might have that you can give to them. So definitely keep that in mind. Jen says, someone in my neighborhood must leave peanuts out for the squirrels. They love to bury them in my containers, and then the dogs dig them out. It's a whole thing. Okay. Yeah, the squirrels will definitely do that. And there's some birds that do that too. Blue jays do that. I had that issue at my last garden with the peanuts being buried. And I thought it was the squirrels because I definitely had a squirrel problem, but I never noticed any squirrel damage in my garden. But I was out there a few different times and I saw the blue jays burying peanuts. And so they're a bird that will take the peanuts from the bird feeder and then fly into the garden, into a pot or container, and dig a little hole and bury the peanut. So it could definitely be the squirrels, but keep your eye out, Jen, because it might be a bird as well that's doing that. The dogs, totally different issue, but there are a lot of animals that could be burying peanuts in your yard. Riverdale Gardens, thanks, Dale. Gifted a Gardner Scott membership. Appreciate that. The Gardner Scott channel membership, it is an option, and I appreciate all of those that help contribute to the channel and go to the Facebook page and come to the members only things we do, all those few other perks that are out there. I do appreciate that. So thank you for making that gift. You show up on a holiday and you're extra kind. I do appreciate that. And I'll highlight this because Jay, you're just incredible. Yeah, as we move into the holiday season, the Gardner Scott Guide to Raised Bed Gardening is a book that's available wherever you get your books. So thanks for that, Jay. We're getting close to the end. I do want to say, I mentioned it a couple weeks ago, but I will not be here next week. I'm going to be traveling next week, and I'll tell you all about that when I get back. But next week, I will not have the live at the normal time. I'll post that as a reminder on different social media. And Jay, I know in the past you've shown up just to let people know that there's no live stream. I do appreciate that. I won't even have a link to a live stream to comment on. So thank you for doing that and kind of doing the support, behind the scenes support. So I'll miss you all next week, but I am going to take a little time off. I'm going to step away from the garden for a little bit, kind of recharge my battery, spend some time with the family so that when I get back, I can get right into the planning and the prep, those things we've been talking about over the course of the last hour and a half, those things that keep me motivated. There's still some gardening projects on my to-do list. So after I get back from this little vacation, I'll be ready to go for a whole nother year. And it'll be 1 week closer to the shortest day of the year, which is such an important point because then the days start getting longer after that point. So it's going to be a lot of fun. Earthly Spaces, thank you for that. I am having a lot of fun planned, and no doubt it will be. I don't want to spoil the adventure before it happens. And thank you, Tony. It is good to refresh. And so I'll be back in 2 weeks. It's just next week that I'll miss the October 20th date. So I'll be back on October 27th at the same time. And just find something else to do next week yourself. Step away from things, recharge your own batteries as you move forward. And thank you for that, Linda. I do appreciate it. Llama, all of you. It's so good. Rafaelia says, I finally saw my Kajari melon turning orange, and some criminal took a bite out of it and pulled it off the vine. Oh no, brought it in to ripen, but it tasted terrible. Oh, so sorry to hear that. Yeah, I grew the Kajari melons last year, and they took forever to change color. But when they did, they were delicious, but they do need to be ripe. Like I was talking about the melons I grew, not Kajari this year. They're just not tasty until they reach that ripeness. So hopefully you can find out what that pest was and deal with it so that you can grow more Kajari melons and they're not pulled off the vine by some culprit that is changing everything that you had planned for. That is an incredible melon. And when it changes color and gets that orange reddish color, it's really cool. It's beautiful in the garden. And I love growing it. I didn't grow it this year. I wasn't planning on growing many melons this year. I did grow melons, but only because my granddaughters chose the seeds, like I told you. But next year, I'm planning to grow the Kajari melons again because they did well for me, and they really were pretty delicious. Oh, before we run out of time, I didn't film it. I should have, but I harvested some figs in my greenhouse. I've never done that before. I have 2 fig trees growing in my greenhouse. They're more like fig bushes, fig shrubs, and they're loaded with figs. I've been waiting for them to get bigger. It's a Chicago fig. I've never had them before in the numbers that they are now. And I expected that they would get bigger. And I walked out a few days ago and saw that 2 of them were brown. They were fig colored. And so I harvested them. They were a little overripe, but incredible. Absolutely incredible. I've never been a big fig fan, but these were incredible. So I'm tending to my figs. I'm looking closely so that I can hopefully harvest some right at the point that they're ripe and not overripe. But I wanted to share that with you because that's one of those moments in gardening that I'll remember forever. The first time I harvested figs from my own fig trees in my greenhouse in Colorado in October. It's just amazing. And they really were delicious. So I'm hoping that I'll get enough, not expecting, I'm hoping that I'll get enough this year to maybe make some fig jam. We'll have to see because my greenhouse is unheated. I'm going to be gone for a week. So we'll see when I come back how the figs are doing. But how awesome is that? This is the 3rd year. It was 2 full years ago that I planted them. So the first season, there was nothing. Last year, I had a couple figs, but they fell off. And this year, I had figs and they were delicious. So if you never thought that you could grow figs in Colorado, it can be done. You need a greenhouse, you need a little extra care, you need the right variety, but like that single tomato that defines a season for me, tasting a fig in the greenhouse now means it was worthwhile to get a greenhouse. I mean, that's how incredible it was. So yeah, it was figtastic. It was incredible. It was felicious. Oh, I clicked on the wrong one. Felicious, figilicious. There you go. Figilicious. Figilicious. I like that. I'll try to remember that. Figilicious. Absolutely figilicious fruit. And Gina says, harvest figs when they just start to turn soft. Got a great harvest this year, but had to bag the whole tree against critters. Yeah, and I wasn't expecting them to change that quickly and to be able to harvest them, and they were much too soft. So I'm going out every day now looking to see others that are starting to change color. Haven't seen any others yet, but yeah, I'll do that little bit of a squeeze test and see if I can catch some at the right time. And so go figure. You guys are awesome. You can grow figs in Colorado. So gonna miss you all next week. This is so much fun. I know this was kind of a deeper topic, but hopefully some of you are leaving with a little more of a smile and a little more of a positive outlook. And I definitely am. And we'll be back in 2 weeks to talk about more things, including my vacation and the fun things that we did. And I am looking forward to sharing that. I hope you have a great week this week. Hope you have a great week next week. I hope every week is wonderful because you're a gardener and you deserve it. So get out there, even if it's cold and rainy, try to find some time, maybe curled up with a new gardening book, and keep your mind as the mind of a gardener. It definitely makes a difference. I'll see you back here in 2 weeks. Have a lot of fun between now and then. And at every opportunity, enjoy gardening.